When I asked my mom about the Hawaii trip I'd paid $22,000 for, she said it like nothing. "Oh, we already went last week. Only for family." The phone almost slipped from my hand as she said it, casual and careless, like she was mentioning a grocery run instead of something that cracked straight through me. Only for family? Those words sank in slow, colder than the buffalo snow stacked outside my apartment window. I had emptied my savings trying to keep this family intact after my divorce, telling myself that if I could just hold everyone together, I wouldn't fall apart. And somehow, I was the one left behind. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I poured myself a drink and stared down at the frozen street below, headlights carving pale lines through the dark. Because if they thought erasing me was that easy, they were about to learn what family really costs. After my divorce, I convinced myself family would be my anchor. When my marriage collapsed, when the future I'd mapped out disappeared overnight, when the house we'd shared suddenly felt like a museum of a life that wasn't mine anymore, I believed going back to them would steady me. Instead, it shrank me. I moved into a small one-bedroom in Buffalo, the kind with ancient radiators that clanged and hissed all night like they were arguing with the cold. My job in finance kept my days full, numbers and forecasts giving me something solid to hold on to. But when the office lights went out, the silence always followed me home. So I did what I'd always done. I fixed things with money. When my mom called stressed about a short month, I covered it. When my dad's car broke down, I paid the mechanic before he even asked. Erin, my sister, never called unless she needed something. Rent, utilities, a laptop for online courses she never finished. I never pushed back. I wired the money and told myself this was what love looked like. Over 2 years, the transfers became routine. Rent payments, grocery money, insurance, emergency expenses that weren't emergencies at all. The kind of giving that doesn't hurt all at once, just drains you slowly until you don't recognize yourself anymore. I told my therapist I couldn't afford sessions anymore, but the truth was I stopped going because spending money on myself felt selfish. I even started tracking their expenses in a spreadsheet, neatly labeled, color-coded, pretending that organization meant control. When I first suggested the Hawaii trip, my mom sounded genuinely happy. "We all need a reset," she'd said. I pictured us barefoot on warm sand, sunlight softening the edges of everything, laughing the way we used to before resentment crept in. It felt like redemption, like a chance to prove I was still worth showing up for. I spent nights comparing hotels, chose one with an ocean view and breakfast included. I booked snorkeling tours, dinners, airport transfers, every detail perfect. I told myself the cost didn't matter. I just wanted to see them happy again. Maybe then they'd see me as more than the daughter whose marriage didn't last. The night I booked the flights, I sat at my desk staring at the confirmation email glowing on my screen. My reflection in the dark window looked tired but hopeful. I didn't realize hope would be the most expensive part. The next morning, my mom texted, "Got it," with a heart emoji. I smiled at my phone, not knowing that was the last time she'd treat me like I belonged. Because betrayal doesn't arrive all at once. It builds quietly. One payment, one favor, one thank you that never comes. The call came on a gray Saturday, one of those Buffalo mornings when the sky looks like wet concrete. I had coffee in hand, my to-do list open, the rare sense that maybe I was getting my life back on track. When I saw my mom's name, I answered with a smile I didn't know I was still rehearsing. "Hey Mom, how's the Hawaii planning going?" There was a pause just long enough to feel wrong. "Oh," she said finally, her voice flat, almost bored. "We already went last week. Only for family." The phone almost slipped from my hand as she said it, casual and careless, like she was mentioning a grocery run instead of something that cracked straight through me. Only for family? Those words sank in slow, colder than the buffalo snow stacked outside my apartment window. I had emptied my savings trying to keep this family intact after my divorce, telling myself that if I could just hold everyone together, I wouldn't fall apart, and somehow I was the one left behind. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I poured myself a drink and stared down at the frozen street below, headlights carving pale lines through the dark, because if they thought erasing me was that easy, they were about to learn what family really costs. A month passed. Snow turned to gray slush, the city heavy and quiet. I hadn't spoken to them, but their absence was louder than any argument. Then, one evening, as I sorted through reports at my kitchen table, my phone buzzed. Erin's name. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "Hey, Lou," she said, sweet and soft. "Listen, the rent's overdue again. Can you send $2,000 just until next week?" I stared at the numbers on my laptop. 2,000. I pictured her on a beach I paid for. "Only for family, remember?" I said quietly. "What?" she snapped. "You heard me." Silence followed, thick and ugly. Then she laughed, sharp and fake. "Don't be ridiculous. You've always helped us." "Not anymore," I said, and ended the call, hands shaking, not from fear but relief. I opened my banking app and scrolled to the automatic payments I'd set up years ago. Rent, insurance, phones, internet. One by one, I canceled them. Each confirmation felt like a door closing. When I finished, I called my financial advisor. "I want everything locked down," I told her. "New passwords, two-factor verification, all of it." She didn't ask why. The next morning, I went to the bank, signed the forms, and slid them back across the desk. "You're taking control," she said softly. "Finally," I answered. Outside, the wind cut hard against my face, but it felt clean. That afternoon, I called a locksmith. "I need new locks and a camera system," I said. By evening, Mike was at my door, a big man with steady hands, the kind of guy who didn't ask questions. He replaced the old brass lock with a heavy deadbolt, mounted a camera above the frame, and showed me the app to monitor it. When he left, I stood by the door watching the feed. The blinking red lights stared back at me, steady and unbothered. For the first time in years, my apartment felt like mine. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and stared at the quiet street below. Somewhere out there, Erin was fuming, Mom was plotting, and Dad was pretending not to notice. They'd call again, I knew it, but this time, I was ready. It didn't take long. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. 3 sharp buzzes that cut through the quiet like a blade. I froze, staring at the small screen on my phone that streamed the camera feed. There they were, Mom in her thick fur coat, arms crossed like she was about to fire someone. Dad beside her, shoulders slumped, eyes darting everywhere but the camera. Erin, of course, in front, lip gloss, shining her phone in hand, pretending this wasn't humiliating. And next to her, a man in a gray suit, clutching a briefcase. I didn't even need to hear him speak to know who he was. I took a slow breath, walked to the door, and opened it just enough to show my face. "Louisa," Mom said first, the practiced calm in her voice, barely hiding irritation. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I said flatly. The man in the suit stepped forward. "Miss Mercer, I'm representing your parents and sister. They're concerned about your recent financial decisions. They've asked me to mediate before this escalates." "Escalates?" I repeated, leaning on the doorframe. "You mean before you drag me into court for cutting off your allowance?" His jaw tightened. "They feel your choices are erratic, potentially unstable." Erin scoffed behind him. "We just want to help, Lou. You've been through a lot." My laugh was short, bitter. "Help? You went on a trip I paid for and didn't even tell me. You don't want to help, you want control." "Watch your tone," Mom snapped. "We're family." "Right," I said. "Only for family. Wasn't that it?" Her face twitched, but she didn't reply. Dad finally spoke, voice low. "Louisa, be reasonable. You know they depend on you." I looked at him. At the same man who used to teach me how to balance a checkbook, who once said independence was everything. "They're grown adults, Dad. They can depend on themselves." The lawyer cleared his throat. "If you refuse support, we'll have to file for guardianship to protect your assets and theirs. It's not uncommon in cases like this." That word, guardianship, hit me like ice water. They weren't just trying to guilt me, they were trying to own me. I straightened, meeting the lawyer's eyes. Then, "I'll see you in court," and I shut the door in their faces. For a long time, I stood there, breathing hard, the sound of their muffled voices bleeding through the door. I let them shout, let them threaten. When the noise finally faded, I poured another glass of wine, sat by the window, and let the city hum fill the space they'd once occupied. A week later, the letter arrived, a formal notice from the county courthouse. Petition for guardianship, filed by Mary Ann George and Aaron Mercer. Reason, concerns over Louisa Mercer's emotional stability and financial judgment. It was absurd. It was cruel. It was exactly what they do. I called my friend Janet the second I finished reading. She didn't sound surprised. "They're trying to break you, Lou," she said. "You need a lawyer." She gave me a name, Daniel Price, a man she'd worked with when her own brother tried to sue her for inheritance money. "He doesn't scare easy," she added. The next morning, I met Daniel in his office downtown, a quiet man in his 50s with calm eyes and a voice that carried weight. After I explained everything, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "What they're doing is manipulation, pure and simple, but we'll need to prove your competence in every way possible." "Fine," I said. "Tell me what to do." He listed everything: employment records, bank statements, evaluations from my doctor, my therapist. If they're going to paint you as unstable, we'll show them the opposite. For the first time in months, I felt steady. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. 2 weeks later, I walked into the courthouse. The cold marble floors echoed under my heels. My hands were trembling, but my chin was high. Mom, Dad, and Aaron sat at the opposite table, whispering to each other. Aaron wore a black blazer, trying too hard to look professional. Mom's eyes met mine and held no warmth, only challenge. Their lawyer, same man from my doorstep, stood to speak first. "Your Honor, Miss Mercer has exhibited signs of instability, erratic financial behavior, and isolation following her divorce. Her family believes she is unfit to manage her affairs." I could almost laugh. They'd built a fantasy version of me, a woman falling apart. Daniel rose calmly. "Your Honor, what you'll see today is not instability, but independence. My client is a successful financial manager with a decade of consistent employment. She has no debt, no erratic spending, and no history of instability. The only thing she's guilty of is saying no." He handed over the thick folder we'd prepared: pay stubs, evaluations, records of every transfer I'd ever made to them. Mom looked away. Aaron rolled her eyes. When the judge called me to the stand, my pulse quickened. I took the oath, sat down, and met the judge's gaze. "Miss Mercer," he said, "in your own words, why did you cut off financial support to your family?" I took a breath. "Because I realized I wasn't their daughter anymore. They were my bank account." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. "I supported them for years: rent, bills, groceries. I even paid for a family vacation to Hawaii, thinking it would bring us closer. But when I asked about it, my mother said, 'We already went, only for family.'" The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you weren't invited?" "No, Your Honor, I wasn't even told." Daniel nodded, stepping forward. "And after that, I stopped paying. A month later, they called asking for rent money. I told them, only for family, remember?" Gasps scattered through the benches behind me. Mom's face flushed red. Aaron's jaw tightened. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. Daniel handed over the final document and evaluation from my doctor, confirming I was mentally and emotionally fit. "Your Honor, the only instability here is the family's financial dependence on my client." The lawyer on their side tried to object, but his voice sounded thin now, desperate. After a pause, the judge spoke. "The court finds no evidence of incapacity. Petition denied. Case dismissed." Just like that. I didn't smile, not yet. I just exhaled, the sound trembling out of me. Mom stood slowly, gripping her purse like a lifeline. Aaron looked like she might cry, though I couldn't tell if it was from shame or rage.
Dad avoided my eyes entirely. As they gathered their papers, I turned toward them one last time. "You wanted control," I said quietly. "Now you have none." Then I walked out. Outside, the cold air hit me like a baptism. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone's weight but my own. The courthouse steps gleamed wet from melted snow, and as I walked down, I thought about the phrase that started it all: only for family. It used to sting. Now it made me smile, because I finally understood. Sometimes the only way to protect your peace is to shut the door, lock it, and let them knock on the outside. 3 months after the trial, Buffalo finally thawed. The snow melted into quiet streams along the sidewalks, and for the first time in years, the city didn't feel like a cage. I moved into a new apartment, smaller but bright, with wide windows that let the afternoon light spill across the floor. The silence here was different, peaceful, earned. I spent my mornings making coffee, not checking my phone for payment reminders. My evenings were filled with small joys: reading, long walks, and a beginner's class at the community center. The first time I made pasta from scratch, the dough tore apart in my hands, but I laughed anyway. It wasn't about perfection anymore, it was about starting over. Janet and my book club friends visited one weekend, bringing a bottle of wine and more warmth than I'd felt in years. As we toasted, Martha said, "You look lighter, Lou." "I feel lighter," I admitted. Later that night, alone again, I wrote a single line in my journal: "Freedom isn't revenge, it's reclaiming what they took from you." Through a mutual friend, I heard Erin was working double shifts to cover her bills. My parents had moved to a smaller place. I didn't feel satisfaction, just closure. They were finally living their own lives. I stood by my window, watching the city glow in the soft spring dusk, and whispered to myself, "Only for family." This time, it wasn't pain, it was peace. That night, I sat by the window, lights of Buffalo flickering like quiet promises. For years, I'd mistaken sacrifice for love, silence for peace, but losing everything had taught me something simple. Family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by respect. They said, "Only for family." I learned that real family doesn't demand your wallet to prove your worth. So I kept my boundaries, my freedom, and my name. If you've ever had to walk away from people who claim to love you, share your story below.